Hello everyone, welcome to our next installment of Freestyle Torah. We're going to hopefully finish off Pashas NOACH. That is in the non-Jewish chapter system. That'll be chapter 8 until chapter 11, I think. Chapter 12. So we'll pick up from where we were last time. Been very busy recently, so haven't managed to get everything keeping up to date, so hopefully we'll do a bit of catching up. So we just finished the flood, the land dried up, right? This is in chapter 8 still, in the middle of chapter 8, verse 15. God tells Noach to come out of the teva, out of the ark. Right? He tells the animals to be fruitful on the land, right? And each animal has to come with its kind. And then Noach built a mizbeach for Hashem. That means an altar to sacrifice. He worked out that the reason why God told him to bring 7 of the kosher animals was kosher animals are also not just kosher for Jewish people to eat, they're also kosher to bring on as a sacrifice on the altar. Only kosher animals are permitted. Right, so he did that. And God smelt the rech nichach. That means it was pleasing, this form of service which Noach did was pleasing. And he said, I'm not going to curse the world anymore, because at the end of the day, man is evil. So it looks like God's saying, look, we've got to adjust the plan for mankind here, seems to be saying. Right? So I can't be on such a level of stringency with the world. Like we said last time, the world was under the lens of action of God called Arich Ampin. That means God was very patient with the world until then. 10 generations, they lived extremely long lives, right? Close to 800, 900 years, all of them, at least. And except for one was mentioned, the Enoch Hanoch lived 365 years. We spoke about that at the end of Pashas. But now God's saying, look, man is evil in his core because of the sin of Adam. He's internalized evil too much. I can't let them keep going with just a few adjustments just to get back, because if you look at it like this, from the sin of Adam they fell down to here, but there's still a pathway to get back up. After 10 generations, God saw they're completely corrupted. There has to be a new way. I'm going to have to reject most of mankind. I'm going to have to look for one person who shines above the others. That's going to be Abraham soon, who's going to do the job of rectifying the whole world by himself. And by the resistance he gets, people trying to push him, and he still succeeds, he's revealing a higher aspect of God's power in the world, that despite all the negativity and the opposition to him trying to reveal God into the world, he still perseveres and does it. And by doing that, he reveals that the negative forces in the world, the other nations which are opposed to God, are merely there to give Abraham a harder job, and because he has a harder job, what he achieves is much more meaningful. So it turns out that it's a new way of working, basically, right? And part of that change is God's going to be more stricter with the world now, right? He's going to be less patient. People are going to live shorter lives. They have more to do, as we're going to see. The Jewish people, who are the continuation of Abraham, they're going to have the Torah, and they're going to have 613 commandments, general concepts of commandments, and the details. There's a myriad of details, millions of details, when it comes down to the actual practical keeping of the commandments and the Torah. That's what God's doing here. So it seems to be, from the fact that somehow I'm not sure how to interpret this, to be honest. what it's got to do with the sacrifices. But you see, the sacrifices somehow told God, look, Noach's trying to bring the lower worlds up and nullify them and subjugate them to me, God's thinking, right? So I won't curse the earth anymore because I can't hold them to such a high standard. Because at the end of the day, man has got too much evil in his heart from his youth. So therefore I won't, it seems to be saying I won't be so strict anymore in the world. But the world's not going to be so nice. You can't have it both ways. And then we have the seasons, and God says that day and night and the seasons will not stop. This could be alluding to the idea of the earth is now, because of the flood, it was tilted on its axis, and because of that you have the seasons now, because if you know how astronomy works, and the way that the world works is if the sun is sort of going around the equator, but really it's the earth going around the sun, so this is the earth. If it's like this, the sun is going to always be above the equator, right? So I mean, if we're standing on earth at the equator, we'd see the sun like that. Okay, so you have to visualize it. But because now the earth is not like this, it's tilted on its axis, so when it goes round, right, over here, the northern hemisphere is more pointing towards the sun, and in winter time the northern hemisphere is sort of pointing away from the sun. That's just how it works. That's how you get the seasons. Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the best example using my fist there, but I hope you got the idea. Right. Okay, so let's carry on now, chapter 9. And God blessed Noach and his children, and he said, and he gave them a blessing or commandment. I think this is a blessing, to be fruitful and multiply. Right? God wants the world to repopulate. Right? And there'll be fear of man upon the animals. That means man's going to be in charge of the world, essentially. Obviously, animals can attack man, but ultimately the power of the world is given to man. And obviously, the reason is because the whole world's created as a crucible to test man and see what man does with the world. Is he going to elevate the world, or is he going to bring the world down? And we see here that everything which is living, you're allowed to eat now, just like the grasses and the vegetation, right? Look at Rashi, actually brings in the juxtaposition between this and Adam. Adam wasn't allowed to eat animals because we said that the purpose of eating is to elevate a physical thing onto the spiritual level, and the most spiritual thing in creation is man. So when we eat things, we bring them up to a spiritual level of rectification, of perfection. That's the idea. If we do it with the right intentions, for the right reasons. And Adam didn't need to do the eating part with animals because he gave names to all the animals. And we explained that giving names means connecting the animals with their spiritual essence. So by doing that, he already elevated the animals. There wasn't any need to do a physical process, right? The vegetables and the doimim, the inanimate, which was in earth, he'd still have to do some sort of rectification for that, either by eating let's say the vegetables with a bit of dirt on them. That will elevate the dirt, which is the inanimate level of the four levels. 4 levels being inanimate, domain, somech, vegetation, or anything which grows from the ground, essentially. Chai, which means animal life, includes birds and fish, and they got humans. So we spoke about this in the lecture all about eating, the holiness of eating. So now God says to Noach, right, because of the destruction of the Torah Mabul, of the generation of the flood, where we know the animals got corrupted as well. Oh, the animals are messed up. We've got to fix the animals again. And now, I guess Noach didn't have that power in order to unify the animals with their spiritual essence through calling them names. Only Adam was able to do that. So he has to use the other method, which is eating them and physically making them elevated. Okay, let's carry on. That's the idea of the eating there of the animals. And then you got the prohibitions of the 7 Noachide laws. You can't have flesh or blood from an animal while it was still alive. So if you extract blood from it or meat from it while it was still alive, it's forbidden. And you're not allowed to kill other people. Suicide is forbidden here. Killing, well, you just look at Rashi, explains all the different prohibitions here. Right? It could be killing through making a person lose blood, just killing the soul, which is without necessarily losing blood, just strangulation, right? And he's warning the animals not to kill humans as well, right? Whether it's from a person who's neutral, like someone who's murdering someone he's not close with, that means he's doing it on purpose, or even a beloved person. That means if a person kills a relative, right? So obviously that would only be in the case of unintentional. God's still going to punish a person for that. So yeah, so be careful not to kill people even by accident. Then it carries on. Anyone who kills another person, he gets a death penalty. His blood must be spilt. Because God made man in his image, in the image of Elohim, right? That's the structure of the universe, the spiritual force, different spheres, different emanations which control the physical world. We're created in that structure, in that formation, as we spoke about in Genesis, in Pashas, chapter 1. Okay, and then he finally finishes off with a commandment. As it says over here, in verse 1, God blesses Noach, and he says, be fruitful and multiply. So that's a blessing. But here he's saying, you be fruitful and multiply. That's a command now. So that's where you have the commandment of having children. And the Talmud in Sanhedrin goes through this whole paragraph here and shows how you can derive all of the 7 Noachide laws from these verses. Some of them more simple, for example, not murdering is quite explicit. Some of them not so straightforward. Okay, we're not going to get into that now. Right. And then God makes a promise to Noach, he's not going to destroy the world again. And when he sees that he would, according to the actions of mankind, bring a flood to the world and destroy the world with another flood, he says, I'm going to put a Pashas in the cloud. Pashas is the rainbow. And the rainbow, so to speak, remind God not to destroy the land. Yeah. Any ideas about what the significance of a rainbow is? We see in the book of Ezekiel, the Pashas is not just a physical rainbow. It's something which happens, something which exists in the spiritual realm as well. So there's obviously deeper ideas running through here as well. I'm not going to guess, so I'm just going to just read through these verses. So God used it to remember his promise. When we're speaking about God remembering, obviously God doesn't need to remember. The idea is, why do people have to have a reminder? It means they want to do something. The reminder causes them to act in a different way. So God's saying, according to my level of strict justice, I would act in a certain way and destroy the world if the world is corrupted again. But the keshes is something which, so to speak, reminds God not to do it. So this is something which causes God to not use the full force of his wrath. Why the keshes? I've got a few ideas. I really don't know, so I'm just going to go quickly through this bit. Anyway, so that's the idea. Keshes is the idea of the 7 colors of the rainbow. Yeah, let's think about it for a sec, maybe. The idea of the sun shining through the clouds. Nasati keshes be'anon, I'll put the rainbow in the clouds. The idea of the clouds, connected with the cloud of glory, the idea of God's bringing down sustenance and life to the world through the rain. The idea of the sun is the idea of when God, yeah, you can say that when God's deciding where to bring rain to the world, to bring, for example, we spoke about this with Adam being created before things actually physically grew to their full stature. It says that God didn't let the grass grow; it was only just poking up above the surface of the ground. Same with the trees. Why? Because he wanted Adam to realize the power of prayer. So he said, right, the ground should sprout the foliage, right, and the trees, but don't grow full yet. Wait for Adam to pray for it. So on the 6th day when Adam prayed, he realized, oh, we need rain. That means on a deeper level, we need God's input into the world, right? My job is to bring God into the world and his shefa, his divine energy into the world. So I'm going to ask for that, and that's a message for mankind. We explained that our job in the world is to ask God for goodness and sustenance, and spiritually and physically, to bring God into the world and realize that the whole world is dependent on God. And by doing that, you're unifying the world with God. You're showing that the world is not separate from God; it's actually totally dependent on Him, which causes the world to actually be imbued with God's light. Now, when we talk about the sun shining through the clouds, so the clouds are the idea of God's providence over the world. The sun, we explained earlier on the 4th day of creation, when we spoke about that. The sun is that aspect of the world where we see nature. There's a king of nature, that's the sun, that's the thing which hides God. We spoke a lot about it in the lecture on the Sukkot lecture, right? The one where the thumbnail actually has me in my Sukkah, right? The idea of God, the light of the 1st day, the light of the 4th day. The sun is that light which supports the physical world where things are superficial. It's a superficial light. But behind everything, there's a deeper light, the light of the 1st day, which is the spiritual light. So when that light of the 4th day is shining through the clouds, that seems to be saying the powers of nature, yeah, where God's hidden, are trying to force their way in, and they're trying to influence God's clouds, if you so to speak. They're interacting with God's providence, right? And the sun saying, look, the world's superficial, the world's not going to the deeper light. So when it shines through that cloud, God says, that itself is going to cause me to remember not to destroy the world, because Otherwise, so in other words, I'm not sure, I'm not describing this very well. The clouds are basically God's providence. God's deciding, am I going to give abundance to the world, light to the world, goodness to the world, or does man not deserve it? And man goes after nature, the sun, so that's the input. The input is from the sun, so the clouds, God's saying, well, the clouds are getting their message to not rain because they're getting the sun. In fact, the sun usually makes the clouds go away, even naturally. And God says, but I don't want to destroy the world, right? I'm going to make sure that the clouds are working despite the fact that man doesn't deserve it. They're not going to rain too much, right? The sun's going to make sure that there's a balance, maybe. Because of the evil of mankind, I can't be too strict. That means because of the sun representing maybe the evil of mankind, the idea of attachment to nature, I'm not going to destroy the world with the clouds. So when I bring down my goodness, I'm going to hold back my goodness. The clouds are not going to be full force, just my abundant energy. People live shorter lives now, right? The world's not going to be so pleasant, right? But it means that there won't be a flood either. So that's the interaction of the sun and the clouds. That's represented by the rainbow. The rainbow is the idea of that light of God, which splits up into 7 colors, which hides that original source of the white light. The idea of the rainbow is Pashas. It's to do with this, I think the Sephira of Yesod, the name Shakai, the name which says the world should be enough. That means God stops creating. He doesn't put too much into the world. That's represented by the rainbow. That's in Ezekiel. But it's very, very deep ideas here, so I'm not sure everyone's going to get them. But anyway, so that's the idea of the rainbow, and God uses that as the tool to change when he wants to destroy the world. It alters it, and it says enough. So it in a way, it's God saying, I'm holding back my overwhelming force to flood the world again. Okay. Nice ideas. I'm not sure if any of them are correct, but they sound that I'm on the right lines here. I'm very cautious usually to make up my own ideas unless I've seen them somewhere. So, but maybe you can tell me if you like these ideas, if they resonate, they make sense. So they have to fit in with everything else. That's the thing. So it's very hard to just make up new things in Torah because they have to. The Torah is a perfect oneness. So if you have a new idea and it doesn't fit somewhere else, forget it. You must be wrong. You either have to adjust the idea slightly, or you just discard the idea. So there you go. That's why I'm a bit hesitant to comment on this bit. Okay, I haven't seen many people speak about this. Right, so then you have the NOACH comes out of the Teva, out of the going back again. He comes out of the ark, and his 3 sons and their wives, obviously, and then he decides to plant a vine. So let's get back here. Okay, right, the 3 sons of NOACH were Shem, Chem, and Yefes. And Chem was the father of Canaan, right? Rashi explains because he's going to be a central character to this story, which we're going to see now. Then NOACH decides to plant a vine, right? He had 2 shoots according to Rashi. He had Zamoros, which are vines, and Ch.8-10, which are sort of saplings for the fig tree. And he decided, which one will I plant first? I'll plant the vines first. And that was a mistake. He shouldn't have started with the wine, right? And that's what Rashi says here. Vayochel NOACH, and he started. The Yochel could also mean chulin, which means mundane. He made himself mundane because he should have started with something more better, different shoot, as in tree shoots which grow from the ground. It should have started with something else. But he started with wine, and wine makes people drunk, and he got drunk, and he was lying naked in the tent. Then Chum, the father of Canaan, he saw, Canaan basically told his father what happened. He saw his grandfather Noach in the tent, naked, and he went and he told his father, "Come, hey, Daddy, look what happened to Grandpa. He's all lying naked in the tent." Then Chum comes in, and he sees his father Noach naked, and he either castrates him or he even sodomized him. Very deep ideas here. The basic idea is that he didn't want Noach to have any more children, right? What was Noach doing? Why did Noach get drunk? So I saw a beautiful idea, is that before the sin of Adam, he and his wife were naked, and there was no busha, there was no shame, and because they ate from the tree of knowledge, which according to one opinion was a grapevine, he brought evil into himself, and therefore the world was what's the word, deteriorated, damaged, and so you have to fix that. So Noach thought, well, God's recreated the world with, like we spoke about last time, by making the table, which means the word, right? And the dimensions of the table are the same letters as Loshon, which means the tongue. So God's recreated the world. We're coming out again, right? So let's fix what we had to fix before. So he decides to drink from the wine of the trees, of the vines, which was the tree of knowledge, but this time doing it in a way where he reverses the process. Instead of the vine causing man who is naked to become clothed, because now he incorporated sin in himself, Noach found a way to actually reverse the process and go back to the level of Adam before sin, where he was naked. That's a very nice idea I heard recently. Unfortunately, it didn't work, maybe because Chum was not on that level. One of the three children was not on that level. So it's echoes of the revolving swords stopping person going back into the Garden of Eden, because we're in a fallen state now. We're not on that level where evil is outside of us, evil is still stuck inside of us. So therefore it wasn't the time. Noach was trying too early to rectify that. Yeah, and Chum, representing Chamimus means heat. It means the idea of physicality. If you want to insult a whole continent, Chum is the ancestor of the African nations, as we see we're going to see in the next chapter, where the descendants of Chum went primarily into the African countries. Cush is Ethiopia, Mitzrayim is Egypt, Phut is, I think it was like Tunisia, and Canaan is the land of Israel. So they were in that region, whereas the other two sons of Noach spread into different directions. Yeah, and we know they're very energetic, very strong people, the Africans, right? We look at the Olympic Games, for example, right? You go to all the African races are the strongest, the fastest, right? That's a chum, that's the energy of chum, right? So very energetic, but energy has to be channeled. So there's a danger of having energy. You can use the energy to serve God, right? But you can also have energy for the physical world as well. That's the idea of chum, just heat and physicality, energy. So that's the danger here. So Noach was trying to get back to that level of Adam before the sin, by being naked, having the wine, the tree of knowledge. But that means that the lowest element, the physical element, has to have its rectification. And how does that come? That means Chom, who represents the derivative of Noach. That's the physical aspect of Noach, has to subjugate itself to God. So instead, Chom goes and he subjugates his own father. He turns it upside down. He makes the physical element of the world dominate over this concept of perfection, the naked man who doesn't have the shame, right? Okay, some deep ideas there. That's what happened. And then, however, the other two sons, Shem and Yefes, the more spiritual one. Shem was the spiritual one. His name means name, Shem. So obviously it's the spiritual one. Yefes is the idea of external beauty. It's the idea of the aesthetic beauty. You've got two aspects of physicality. You've got the actual energy, and then you've got the structure and the form, right? We spoke about structure and form, form and matter. We spoke about many times already in this series. Yefes is the idea of yofi, beauty, right? The idea of form, the form of a human being. The Greeks come from Yefes. They were all about the beauty of the philosophy of man, science, sports, right? Elegance, sophistication. The sophistication of man, that's in the European countries, right? Or basically the dominant place where you see the descendants of Yefes, where you see the idea of expansion of science much more in Europe and those connected countries. Because they're more about looking at the abstract beauty of man. And that's the idea of ideas, of concepts. Whereas Chom is about just power and strength, heat. Whereas Shem is about essence, right? And that's the Jewish people. It's also the Arab nations, which are very spiritual people, as we spoke about many times. And you have also Asaph. Asaph is the Western world, which is Rome, which is more like Christianity. That's the sort of like the spiritual element to man, right? We could discuss how all the Eastern nations fit into this. I'm not sure, but that's a general idea. I'm just trying to show you how maybe these three sons come out in modern nations. But anyway, Shem and Yefes were the ones who were not the physical ones, so they were able to cope with this. Shem looked at the world in a spiritual way. Yefes, as in the beauty, look at the concepts of the world, Greek philosophy, that sort of idea. And they saw Noach lying naked there, and they saw something which was not appropriate, right? Whether it fits in with this idea of Noach rectifying the sin of Adam, they saw he didn't succeed, so therefore we have to cover up the body again, just like Adam had to cover up his body in the Garden of Eden, where he failed. So here Noach also failed, maybe because of Chom, because Chom wasn't influenced under this new paradigm of man returning to perfection. So Shem and Yefes, they covered over their father, right? And then Noach woke up and he realized what his small son had done, right? And he says, right? Okay. So he saw that there was a pechisus, a lacking. There was something small about Chom, right? He didn't reach that greatness of what man was meant to be. He was cotton, right? The difference between a godel and a cotton, a mature person and a cotton, a child, right? A godel is someone who gives, who's able to give and create, whereas a child can't do that. He's a taker, right? So Chum didn't want to let there be more children in the world. He was selfish. He castrated his father. He didn't want his father to have a fourth child because, I'm going to have more arguments, more brothers to argue with, as Rashi points out. So he said, castrate the father so he can't have any more children, right? He's stopping this idea of NOACH continuing in the world in its maximum force. Yeah, so he's saying, so basically, NOACH, you're out of the picture now. It's down to the children to perfect the world. But of course, Chum himself didn't want to be subjugated to the message of NOACH. He wanted to dominate over NOACH. That's the idea of him sodomizing his father. So NOACH realizes what the small son had done. The one who was lowly, the one who wasn't able to elevate himself back. So that what he say? So now Canaan, he didn't want to curse Chum. He said Canaan which was the son of Chum, who actually started the whole saga going, by reporting on his father, reporting on NOACH to his father Chum. Just read the Rashis here. So he got cursed, and the punishment or the rectification was he should be a servant to his brothers, right? But blessed is the God of Shem, right? And Canaan should be a servant to him as well. Just look at the Rashis here quickly if you want. And then he gave a blessing to Yefes. Yefes should be expansive. So we know that the descendants of Yefes, which we're going to see in chapter 10, are going to be covering a huge landmass, right? They're going to spread east and west, right? And this is the idea of the African tribes being, especially Canaan as well, which were in the original land of Israel, destined to be servants to the other brothers. And we know through history that's been quite a dominant feature, right? The European countries have been generally more dominant than the African ones. Of course, we know the terrible slave trade where they abused this idea of service, servants and slaves. The idea of a slave is meant to be like a teaching role, right? What was the problem of Chum? Chum went after his heat, his energy. Energy is important. That's how you connect with God. That's how you serve God, with energy. But you need direction. Imagine you've got a massive fire burning. You need to channel it to make it like a power station or a car. It needs to channel the fuel burning into the right place to make it go. There needs to be energy. There needs to be a Chum in the world. But Chum revealed that I'm using the heat not to be subjugated to God. Right? I want to dominate over God's purpose. So what's the punishment? It's a really rectification, because he didn't want to subjugate himself to God's ideals in the world. Therefore, he has to learn how to subjugate himself. So he becomes a servant to Shem and Yefes. Shem and Yefes hopefully are going to be the ones who are going to give him that direction, right? Right. And Shem and Yefes, we explained in another lecture. Because of their characteristics, Shem looks at the essence of something, Yefes looks at the structure of something, but not on a deeper level. Yeah, they give meaning to the world, right? So they're able to take their tzura, their form, and sort of use it to guide Chum, the energy, which is the matter. So we've got this interaction between form and matter again. But here we've got two competing forms. We've got the internal form the one of essence, that's Shem, and we've got the external form of the European countries, or the Bnei Yefes, imprinting their impression on Chom. That is, that's an alternative tzura. And they both got their place, but ultimately, that's what the Hanukkah story is about, the battle between the two tzuras, the battle between the two forms, the two sources of definition, Shem, which results in the Jewish people, or Yefes, which results in the Greeks. Now, of course, I should speak about this because I know there's people excuse the slave trade in America because they're basing on these verses here. So what's going on here? As we say, God doesn't punish people for no reason. He doesn't curse people. Everything's there for a reason in order to bring the rectification and perfection of the world. So we see the prime example of how the relationship between Shem or Yefes with Chom is meant to work. Now that NOACH said that he has to be a servant to his brothers, which means the nations which come from Chom should be acting in a servant role with the other one, with the other brothers. It's in order to bring a certain union between those sets of brothers in order to create a new rectification for the world and for themselves, obviously. So Chom is meant to take on the ideals and the direction of, let's say, Shem, to keep it simple, right? The idea there's a God in the world, there's a purpose to the world, and Chom is the one who says, fine, okay, I've got a lot of energy, and now I know where to direct it. Beautiful idea. So they're working together, right? Now, obviously, if Chom starts doing his own thing, then the master has to say, no, get back in line, right? But once they're acting appropriately with each other, it's a very close relationship, which is exactly what we have with Abraham, and his servant Eliezer. And Eliezer was such a holy man because he learned from Abraham. He's one of the only people in history who never died. He went to heaven alive. He never died. Right? Because why? Because the ultimate purpose of creation is to elevate the body so it becomes at one with the soul. Right? So you can only do that if you've got a body. And Chom is the one who represents that concept of a body in the world, the heat, the energy of the body. And when that's directed to the right direction, the right purpose, then it has the highest potential to become the most perfect human possible. So therefore, Eliezer unified his soul with his body, because his body has the ability to. He's the master of the body, basically, if you want to put it like that. Chom is the master of the body. You can master the body in order to be strong and to dominate, to unfortunately cause wars and killing, right? Physically, Chom always wins a battle if it's just based on brute strength and power. But he wins the battle of the body if he uses it to serve God as well. The strongest out of the three brothers, right? It's energetic. So once that body's used, he's the ultimate revelation of God's oneness. That even something which is the most physical thing, even that connects with God's purpose. That's the highest form of revealing God's oneness in the world. See the third Keystone lecture. I can't keep repeating it every time. And you'll see this idea very clearly. Yeah. Unfortunately, in generations later, especially recently, the American slave trade, the Western countries' slave trade, they used the verses in Genesis here as an excuse to subjugate and cruelly sort of punish and subjugate the African slaves, which is not what the idea is at all. The idea is to work with them, to guide them, to mentor them, to teach them, right? And that happened with many slaves. They were freed eventually and became upstanding members of society. That's how it should be. Yes, there's always evil in man. So that's just what happened there, unfortunately. That's the idea of the interaction between these three brothers and how they come out practically. So let's finish off now with we mentioned the reward for Shem and Yefes, who covered up their father. They get a reward of 2 coverings, right? Shem gets a covering of tzitzis because he wanted to do the mitzvah more, because the Shem's essence is looking at the essence of something. So when he saw Noach lying there in disgrace, he looked at Noach as someone created in the image of God who's lying in disgrace. So you have to cover that up. Yefes looked at it as a beautiful human body. Of course, the human body is amazing. It's created in the image of God. Yeah, true. But he was focused more on the beauty of the structure in itself. So he was more attached to the body itself. The beauty of the body was lying in disgrace. So therefore, his reward was he gets burial for his dead descendants, because if he's only interested in the body and not the soul, so God's going to reward him for covering a body without a soul, which means he gets to get burial for his descendants, as it says in Ezekiel, by the war of Gog and Magog, the war of Armageddon, which we've spoken about. We've got a whole series about that. He gets to merit to cover up the disgrace of those dead bodies. It says measure for measure. Everything's measure for measure in the Torah. Right. Okay, and let's quickly do the beginning of the next chapter. And Noach lived to 950 years old and he died. Fine. And these are the descendants of Noach, Shem, Chem, and Yefes. Those are 3 children, and each of them had a number of children, which were basically make up the 70 nations, which we'll speak about next time. Mitzvah Hashem, please God. The children of Yefes, this is an important one. Gomer, I say that's Germany, right? So talk about the Western nations here. Magog, we said that's probably Ukraine in the Armageddon lecture. Modai is Media, which is part of the Persia and Media, so it's around Iran. Yovan is Greece. Tuval, we weren't sure where Tuval was. Meshech, we said that might be Russia. Meshech, Moscow, right? And Tyros is Persia. So we're looking at basically the European countries plus Russia plus Iran. So we're talking about most of the northern hemisphere here. That's why Yefes had the blessing. Yaftalakim Yefes, God will make Yefes expansive. So if you look throughout history, the children of Yefes have been the ones who have dominated the landmass of the world. Okay. Gomer made a mistake. Bnei Gomer, the children of Gomer, is Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz is Germany, and Rifas Togarmah, that's Turkey. So just showing you some of the other countries. Right, from these, the islands of the nations were dispersed, so they lived on islands, like the Greek islands, for example. Each one to their tongues, to their languages, according to their families. We're going to see this only later on. They had different countries and languages, because that only happened after the generation of the Tower of Babel, which hopefully speak about next time. The children of Chomor, Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, Canaan. Cush is Ethiopia, Mitzrayim, we said Egypt. Put, I think it's around Libya, northern Africa. And Canaan is the land of Israel. And then the children of Cush got all these nations. And Cush had a significant child called Nimrod, and we're going to see what he does later. He's going to be the one who instigates the rebellion against God at the time of the Tower of Babel, right? As they say, Hashem, he trapped people with his words. He was very good at influence. He was a very charismatic character, and he intended to rebel against God. We'll see how that works later. And so now we're getting a bit of a clue where the children of Chum are situated, right? So he is from Cush, Cush's oldest son. Cush is Ethiopia, but Cush's son Nimrod, his country was in Babylon, right? That's where modern day Iraq is. Erech Akkad v'Chalne, Beretz Shinos, all in Babylon, right? And then Ashur went out from that land. He rebelled against Nimrod. He said, I don't like this rebellion against God. He was the only one of the 70 nations who actually didn't take part in the generation of the building of the Tower of Babel, which was a rebellion against God, right? And then we've got Resem ben Ninveh, that's Assyria, that's western Iraq. Okay. And then in Mitzrayim, Egypt, had several descendants as well. And if you have a look at the names, it's very interesting. They're all plural names. Ludim, Anomim, Lehovim. That's a plural. So what's the idea of all these plurals? So the idea of Mitzrayim was the idea of physicality. They were the ultimate country which was to do with physicality, and the number 2 explains the idea of separation. When people go after their lusts, they're separate from each other because each person's selfish. They want what they want, right? The Plishtim, the Philistines, not to get confused with the Palestinians, even though they actually coincidentally live in the same place, the west side of the land of Israel. That's where the Plishtim were, and the Philistines and the modern day Palestinians are also there. Interestingly enough, there's a book by Rabbi Glazerson called Philistines and Palestinians, or Palestinians and Philistines. He goes into like some deep ideas showing connections there. Yeah, we see that it's the idea of when you speak about plural, you're talking about choyme, you're talking about just masses of something without a singular definitions. So that you're just physical people here, right? We see what 2 of the sons did with each other. They were totally steeped in immorality, right? And then Canaan had many children. Some people say some of these are some of the eastern countries, like China, Japan. I don't know, can't say for sure, right? And then you have Shem. Is going to be the 3rd of the sons, and we're going to see that he had a son called Arpachshad, and Arpachshad is the father of Shelach, who's the father of Ava, who's a very righteous man. So Shem and Ava, we're going to see later on, they had their own Torah academy, so to speak, which Abraham and Isaac and Jacob all went to. Right, so they were the holy men of the world after Noach passed. Right, and Ava had two sons. One of them was Peleg. Why is it called Peleg? Because Peleg means to split up. Right, because in his day, the world was split up. As Rashi explains, when he died, the year when he died, that's when the Tower of Babel was built. And they've got other generations here, right? And these are the families of Shem, each one, and the way, where did they go? Right? Not sure where these countries are. The mountains of the east. It says it's around the land of Israel and to the east of it, it seems. Maybe like Saudi Arabia. I think the children of Yoktan, a lot of the names here, like Uzal is actually a place in Yemen, right? I think it's there's a University of Uzal, I think so. So a lot of these names are related to where Saudi Arabia is now today. That's approximately where the countries of the world spread. So Yefes spread to the north, basically the Eurasian continent, more or less. The children of Ham went to Africa, so especially northern Africa. I guess they spread later on to the southern parts of Africa, but the initial spreading of the 70 nations was to the northern parts of Africa and areas within what's called the country of Israel today. And Shem was more to the south and maybe more to the east as well. So that's the world map. So you've got Yefes is the expansive one, the whole top part of the main continent of the world, which is Europe, Asia, and Africa. Africa is more for the Chum nations, and Shem is more towards the east, but maybe more to the south a bit of Israel as well, with the Saudi Arabia, as we saw there. And we'll see what happens with these nations, these 70 people who are the forebearers of the 70 nations next time. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.